I will stand.
Okay.
Okay, there is no clear protocol how to proceed. First of all, please let me welcome Professor Dr. Arvind Singhal, who is a professor of communication at the University of Texas, El Paso, and he's also fellow, distinguished fellow at the Bill or Clinton Public School of Public Service in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm sorry, we might be clapping a bit more as we are used to because he likes when people clap. Anyway, first of all, thanks to the U.S. Embassy in Bratislava and Slovakia. Thanks to Face to Face, which is a regular meeting discussion platform they have, and thanks to Eurocine, which is a film viewing and discussion evenings at the Faculty of Social and Economic Sciences at Community University in Bratislava. We have been able to bring together this distinguished fellow and guest, and at the same time, interesting films we are about to see. One thing needs to be said before Arvind starts to introduce the film and the topic of nonviolence, and that is that because of the recent events, that is the award of Nobel Prize for Peace to 3 distinguished peace activists who used nonviolent strategy to fight violence. We will be watching only one part from the film A Force More Powerful, which was the original film we wanted to see. It will be a part about Mahatma Gandhi and the nonviolence. And then we will watch a film. It's a short documentary film which actually received quite many awards at documentary film festivals. And it's called Pray the Devil Back to Hell, and it's actually a film about these 3 ladies who were awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace. So I think this change of program was confirmed and accepted by Arvind, and it fits very well into the topic he would like to talk about tonight.
Excellent.
So Arvind, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Good evening. I know we've got our distinguished translators at the back. Thank you for all that you're doing. Does anybody need translation? You can still translate, though, it doesn't matter. But I guess what we are saying is if somebody would like to get headphones, given I speak in a form of English which may not be so clear, you should feel free to do so. Okay, nonviolence, a force more powerful. So we'll begin with a little activity. So I would like you to turn to the person who is sitting next to you. It could be in front of you, it could be behind you, it could be on your side, left, right, whatever. And you should do this game also. And I would like one person to close their fist. Okay? So you decide with whom you are, and I would like one person to close their fist. Yeah? Okay. And I'd like you to really close it. Really close it. Okay. The other person can do whatever they need to do, apply whatever force they need to apply in order to get that fist open. Starting now, you have 7 seconds. All right. Adriana, were you able to? No? Was there somebody else who was not able to open? Everybody else got it opened? No? No? Okay. Didn't happen. Why not? You tried, but...
It was less than 7 seconds.
It was less than... No, actually it was a little more than 7 seconds. Okay. How many of you tried to get the fist opened without actually touching it? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. It's not bad. What did you do? How did you?
I said, please. She asked me.
You were asked, please, would you open? Okay, and how about you?
The same.
Oh, the same. Did you just listen to her and then asked her, or?
Well, I first tried to open my
Oh.
then I thought, oh,
So first you tried to clasp it, and then you, Okay, and yes, sir, how about you? Just asked, would you please? Okay. Now, how many of you were really trying hard to open it? There was more than one person. Okay, well, anyway, what's the point? I don't know. But you figure it out, yeah? We may ask ourselves the question, what is it about us that sometimes gets us to open it with force when there may be 1,000 other ways of trying to open it? So I don't know what the point is, but let's think about it. Okay. I feel a personal connection with the notion of a force more powerful, but a different kind of a force, because I was born and raised in India, and I am very conscious that I'm the first generation of Indians who were born in an independent India. And I'm also very conscious of the fact that India gained its independence not with bullets and not with cannons, but with a force that was more powerful. And that force has been talked about in different ways. Some call it soul force, some call it human force or the force of humanity. Some call it the force of love. But it's a different kind of a force than the force of physical force. And of course, we had a leader whom we called Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma means, does anybody know? Why? It wasn't his name. Mahatma. Why did we call him Mahatma? Would you like to know? Okay. So Maha means big or great, and Atma means soul. So you combine the two, and it's great soul. And why was he called the great soul? It's a question. He was not a commander of armies. He didn't hold any political office. He had no artistic talent. He made no scientific discoveries. He wasn't a good speaker. He wouldn't have won any beauty contest. He was 5 foot 4.5 inches tall and 110 pounds. But yet, we call him the great soul. Why? It's still a question.
He was an inspiring figure, charismatic.
My mother's side of the family worked very closely with Mahatma Gandhi. So I grew up on many stories about Mahatma Gandhi, and most people will say, he was as plain as could be. he tried to bereft himself of charisma. His living philosophy was, I need to reduce myself to zero. Now I can hear myself. Thank you, Andres. And can you picture him? How will you describe Mahatma Gandhi? What does he look like? Visualize him. Spectacles, round spectacles. Wrapped in a white loincloth with a stick. Working with a spinning wheel. You've described all his possessions. A spinning wheel with which he made his own cloth. The cloth that he wore. He had a plate, one plate. He had a little desk. He sat on the floor. And he had a watch because he was very mindful of time. And he had his shoes. That's it. He didn't have to wake up in the morning and say, okay, what colored shirt would I wear? Or what socks go with which trouser? Or, you know, when do I need to apply for this so that I... His mind was uncluttered. And he said, all my life I've tried to make my life uncluttered so that I can think about a certain way of being. So there are many stories about Mahatma Gandhi. One of my favorites is, and this is just to set the context, because by nonviolence, we don't just mean issues of force. I think it's much deeper than that, at least when it comes to Mahatma Gandhi. So one story is he always traveled third class. No? Never traveled first class, never traveled second class in train. No? Always third class. And sometimes the viceroy, the British viceroy, would say, well, Mr. Gandhi, we'd like to have meetings with you, and you would represent, India or India's interests, and we can send a plane so that, or we can create a special train. And he said, oh, no, I'll come in my... And he always came third class in his poor man's clothes. He was at one point in time, he was a very rich and successful lawyer in South Africa. He wore bow ties and top hats. Qualified as a lawyer when he was 22. In the year 1905, his annual salary at that time, practice, was worth $30,000 US a year. That was 106 years ago. He was very well-to-do. And then, as he transitioned, so he was asked, Mr. Gandhi, why do you travel third class? It's a good question, no? Like, you could do better. And he said, my friend, you know, I travel third class because, as you know, there is no fourth class. When he was in London negotiating India's home rule, and he was wearing his, his handspun, a journalist said, surely, Mr. Gandhi, you're not going to Buckingham Palace to have tea with the king, George V, dressed like this? And he said, my friend, as a matter of fact, I was planning to go like this because I know that the king would have enough for the both of us. One day a mother came and she brought her 5-year-old son and said, Bapu, he was called Bapu by us, no? Father. It's a sort of a loving father, father of the Indian nation. Bapu, would you tell him, he doesn't listen to me, would you tell him not to eat so much sugar? If you tell him, he'll listen. And Bapu asks the little boy, do you like sugar? He says, yeah. Does your mother tell you not to have so much sugar? Yeah. And you don't listen to her? I don't. Okay. He says, sister, to the girl, the woman, come back after 2 weeks. She's like, 2 weeks. And she thought, maybe there are other people waiting to see him, so she left. She comes back after 2 weeks. She says, Bapu, I don't know if you remember. Oh, yeah, of course I remember. So brings the child, says, do you still like sugar? Oh, yeah, I love sugar. Does your mother tell you not to eat? Yeah, she tells me. Do you listen to her? Mm-mm. So Bapu says, tomorrow, I would like you to do a small thing for me. He asks the little boy. And the boy says, what? He says, tomorrow, could you try for me, please, to cut down a little bit on your sugar? He says, just a little bit? Just a little bit. So if you have 10 candies in a day, have 9.5. So 9.5, okay. And he says, then the next day, could you cut down a little bit more for me, please? Would you do it for me? He said, okay. So have 9 if you can, the next day. Okay. And then he says, the day after that, could you try cutting down just a little bit more? And so on. And then he said, sister, thank you for coming. And so she says, Bapu, I have a question. What you told him right now, why didn't you tell him 2 weeks ago? You could have told him exactly the same thing 2 weeks ago. He said, yeah, you're right, sister. I could have. But sister, you don't know that I also like sugar. And first, I had to see that it was possible to cut down sugar. And it is. A little bit at a time. This is a few months before he passed away. You have an idea why he was called the Great Soul? He was asked by people, how did you do it, Mr. Gandhi? How could you take 350, 400 million Indians and mobilize them, against the might of the British Empire? And we know the sun never set on the British Empire. How could you do it? He said it was very simple. Got rid of colonialism. It was very simple. Very simple. And I was always in control. So the journalist, what do you mean, Mr. Gandhi? It was very simple. And you were always in control. He said, well, listen, I never tried to mobilize anybody. In the past 40 years, I have every day been working not on others, on myself. And I noticed that when I began to work on myself, things around me began to change. And I was always in control. And then he tells the journalist, you can always be in control. I think you always know what the right thing to do is. Okay, so with that introduction, Mahatma Gandhi, force more powerful, and you can see this is not just the force of nonviolence, it's a different kind of a force. It's a force that, as Henry David Thoreau, who greatly inspired Gandhi, would say that for every virtuous person, there are 999 patrons of virtue. You can say 99,999, whatever, or 999 million, blah, blah. And what was the point? That these people appealed to us because we admire what they do, but we cannot be like them, or so we think. So we just admire those qualities, no? Mr. Gandhi, put him on a pedestal. And when somebody would say, how Mr. Gandhi, he said, well, I am the most ordinary person. but I never miss an opportunity anytime, today, now, here, with the person who's in front of me, to try to be the best that I can be. That's it. I never miss an opportunity now, with whoever who's in front of me, to be the best I can be. That's what I've tried to do the last 40 years, 50 years. So, okay, so with that introduction, should we roll the film? Are you ready? Okay. Thank you. So I would like to spend a minute or two, maybe three, asking the triad, the group of three, what did you hear? Okay, I'm not asking you to share with the larger group what you said, but I'm interested in asking you what you heard which appealed to you. So let's just quickly go. And I'll stay focused on you for a minute, and then you can, you can speak. If not, I'll keep moving.
Just clarification, what did we hear?
Which appealed to us. What did we hear in our group which appealed to us, which gave us some reflection? And you may say, I didn't hear anything which appealed to me, and that's fine. We can then continue moving. So,
Silence appeals to me.
Actually, we were thinking that we would say that the 20th century, we wouldn't call it the century of non-violent conflicts, because we believe that there was also several conflicts which were violent enough, so it doesn't deserve this name.
okay. Okay, good. So in your triad, basically your discussion was that the 20th century was not a century of non-violent conflict, but it was a century of violent conflict. Okay, that's fine, good. Anything else? That was the only reflection, or were there some other thoughts? No? Okay, good. Let's move on.
Because of the recording.
Okay. Okay, so we thought that it was really inspiring and admirable, and we were just wondering why it was just only one example in the history of how to fight the conflicts in this way.
Because conflict is fought in other ways as well. Okay, yeah, as we know, it is. Okay. Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
But I don't know what should I say, because I was...
We were saying, if you wish to share what happened in your triad.
I can say.
Yeah?
We had a nice discussion, and there was a question raised when it Okay.
Please.
There was a question raised, like, what would be a reason for Slovak people to march for? Because we were really talking about this march for Salt, so we were thinking, like, what would be worth it to march in Slovakia. We didn't find any specific answer, but we discussed. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything
Graham?
else?
Anything to add, Andre?
At the same time, okay. We were wondering about this kind of like an inner conflict in Gandhi, that at the same time he was this selfless person who didn't want to be charismatic and didn't want to be perceived as a leader, and at the same time that he was like this genius of political campaigning and basically genius of political public relations, and this doesn't go like well together. I mean, it's like in contradiction to each other.
Is the conflict more for you as you critique it, or do you think this was a conflict for Gandhi?
I wouldn't say it was a critique on Gandhi, but I would say it's a critique for anyone who tries to, I mean, conceptualize who Gandhi was and what he did, and basically it challenges one interpretation frame for Gandhi as a personality or public figure.
Right. In that he's not monolithic.
Yeah, yeah.
That, you know, you can look at him in a variety of different ways. Okay, good. Oh, it's so nice to... I know people are just reaching out for the microphone.
Well, we a little bit discussed Soviet intervention to Czechoslovakia in 1968, and we tried to look for some similarities or similar features. Maybe Jan Palach, and we discussed this, and what else?
And what did the discussion say?
Maybe we posed the question among us to whether it is possible 100 years after to do such things, or whether this behavior may affect people the same way as it was with Gandhi.
Okay, good. So we're looking at the relevance of that idea today.
I was wondering if it was successful and if it would be successful today, today's life.
And what do you think?
I don't know, really.
Good.
And maybe one another note, like to what extent like the governments and other power managers learned how to deal with such an action, public action. Whether that's the question of the like future success of these events.
Did the British government become smarter about how to deal with? Okay. What else do we have? Good. This is great.
We discussed the importance of everyday human activities for politics and how to use it in politic action.
And by everyday activities, you meant?
For example, it was the salt or Gandhi, or the cotton he
spun
every day, and the journey he took. It took time to find out what everyday life is about for Gandhi, and once he discovered it, he could use it for his political activity.
Yeah. As they said, that who would think that you could, by lighting a fire under a kettle which held sea water, you could really be unseating the might of the British government. That's powerful. That you are lighting a fire. Well, first you collect seawater and then you light a fire and let that kettle boil. Okay, thank you. We certainly want to go to our to Lucia and to I know they are translating, and also at the same time, we would love to hear what you discussed.
What I remember from the discussion, what appealed most to me was that every one of us can do a little bit, bring a little bit of grain to the big pile. And when every one of us brings just a little grain, when there are enough of us, there will be a big mountain that may have big power. So let's not be discouraged by, I cannot do anything. One grain is enough. So that's what I remember.
Okay, thank you.
Most.
And then,
Okay.
I'm fine. No, I'm fine, thank you. I think Lucia has said it well, and just maybe the fact that the vision and the belief in the real trust in your force and your powers can be amazingly powerful in transforming not only yourself and your environment, but then everything else. Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else? Any other thing? Do you want to come back and say something else? Anything to add? Thank you. So there's a story. It's a Jewish story, but I think it can be a story of it's a human story. Let's just put it this way. But it comes from a Jewish philosopher, so I have to at least attribute it. So it's the story of a 70-year-old man, could be a woman, but let's say in this case it's a man, who is reflecting back on his life, the journey that he's taken. And he says, when I was 20 years old, I wanted to change the world. And by the time I was 30, I realized that the world was too big a place for me to change. So I will just focus on my country. And then by the time I was 40, I realized that my country, Slovakia, India, Estados Unidos, USA, so big to change, that I will just focus on my city, Bratislava or New Delhi. And then by the time I was 50 years old, I realized that my city, such a big place to change, so I should just focus on my neighborhood. And then by the time I was 60, I realized that my neighborhood, people whom I grew up with, who I know and who know me, very, very difficult to change. So I should just work on my family. And now that I'm 70 years old, I have realized that my family, my loved ones, who I know, who know me, are the most difficult people to try to change. So maybe I should work on changing myself. And then he rewrites the story and he says, what if I had begun to work on myself when I was 20? Maybe by the time I would be 30, those around me, my family, my loved ones, perhaps I may have an effect on them. Maybe by the time I'm 40, people in my neighborhood, my extended networks, perhaps they might begin to change. And maybe by age 50, people in my city may know a little about what we've been doing for these 20 years, and maybe that may begin to change. And by the time I'm 60, maybe people in my country would come to know what has been done, and perhaps things may begin to change. And now that I'm 70 years old, perhaps somebody may say that, here is somebody who changed the world a little bit. So it's a story for reflection. Oftentimes, we think that issue of non-violence or violence, does it matter? Will it have this effect? We think outside of ourselves. We always do, no? So once I overheard a conversation between a young woman who flew from Mexico City to Calcutta to meet Mother Teresa. And I happened to be there because I had a long corresponding relationship with Mother Teresa for many years and found myself in her presence several times. And this young woman from Mexico said, "Mother, I have come all the way from Mexico City because I want to hear from you how I should begin." And she said, "What, begin what?" She said, "I really want to help the world. And I have come to you so that you could tell me how I could help the world." And Mother Teresa's response was, "My child, you should go back." She said, "I should go back? Mother, I've come to you so that you could tell me how I can help improve the world. I'm committed, I'm dedicated." And she said, "Yeah, my child, you go back." And she said, "Go back and do what?" She said, "Go back and start from here. Start from where you are. Begin with the person who's in front of you. And start now." That's it? She said, "Oh, that's it." Very difficult to do. Very easy to intellectualize, no? Easy. So we were asked a question when we were, will this work? Will this work? And we are always asking those kinds of questions. I guess maybe the other question to ask is, when I am having a relationship with somebody who's in front of me, how do I behave? Am I kind? Am I violent in my thought? And you're saying, "Oh, no, please don't give me that guilt trip," right? Because, gee, I want to protect myself. And that's okay. But we always tend to externalize these issues as opposed to where are we in the picture? The question always is, where are you? I mean, what are you doing? What can you do? Maybe the question is, as opposed to looking outward, maybe it is to shine a light inward. Or at least that's what the notion of nonviolence is. It is not so much projecting the injustice as much as it is also shining the light inward and saying, what is it that I am able to do? So we'll just leave it as a reflection. This is not a prescription. It's just a reflection. Okay, I think we'll roll the next one. Thanks. How long is this film?